Ladies and gentlemen, there are moments in history when a single voice has changed the destiny of nations. Not because it was the loudest, not because it was the most eloquent, but because it carried the weight of conviction, the strength of discipline, and the fire of purpose. That is what it means to speak like a leader. Today, I am not here to entertain you. I am not here to whisper comfortable words. I am here to challenge you. Because the truth is, your voice is a weapon. It can command courage in the darkest hour, or it can sow doubt that breaks an army apart. How you speak, how you deliver your truth, can decide whether people follow you or forget you. And so I ask you this: if you were called to stand in front of those who depend on you, your family, your team, your nation, would your voice carry the strength of leadership? Would your words ignite action, or would they drift away like smoke in the wind? Stay with me, because in the next few minutes you will learn not only how to speak like a leader, but how to leave a voice that echoes long after you are gone. Clarity is the first and most essential element of leadership communication. When a leader speaks, their words are not just sentences drifting into the air. They are orders, they are guidance, they are the lifeline of those who listen. And when clarity is absent, confusion takes root, and with confusion comes hesitation, and hesitation can cost lives, missions, or the trust of the people who believed in that leader. A leader must understand that complexity may impress the mind, but clarity commands the heart. It directs action. It leaves no doubt about what must be done, when it must be done, and why it must be done. Great leadership speech is not measured by how much a leader knows, or how beautifully they can craft elaborate phrases. It is measured by how well they can distill the essential truth into words so simple, so sharp, that no one mistakes the intent. The battlefield of ideas is crowded with noise, with opinions, with distractions. Clarity cuts through that battlefield like a blade, drawing the line between uncertainty and purpose. A leader who speaks clearly is a leader who cannot be misunderstood, and when you cannot be misunderstood, you cannot be misrepresented, and you cannot be ignored. Throughout history, the voices that have endured are the ones that knew how to strip away unnecessary weight. Leaders who chose precision over performance, substance over spectacle, are the ones remembered. They understood that clarity is not weakness. It is strength. It is the ability to take something vast, something complex, and reduce it to its purest form, so that anyone, from the highest officer to the newest recruit, can carry it forward without hesitation. That is the power of leadership speech. Its ability to travel down the chain of command, without losing its meaning. Clarity demands discipline. It is not easy to remove the comfort of extra words. It is not easy to resist the temptation of sounding intellectual, of decorating speech with cleverness. But leadership has never been about cleverness. Leadership is about responsibility, and responsibility requires that every word carries weight. Every instruction, every message, must land with absolute precision. In the military, one unclear command can mean the difference between victory and defeat. In life, one vague direction can determine whether people reach their potential or stumble into doubt. The stakes are always high, whether in war, in business, or in personal leadership. A leader who values clarity knows that words must serve action. They do not exist to entertain. They exist to move people forward. And so the leader removes ambiguity. They speak in a way that even in the heat of pressure, the meaning does not blur. They understand that when people look to them, they are not looking for complicated theories. They are searching for certainty. They are searching for a voice that makes the path visible. When the fog of uncertainty is thick, that voice must be clear. Clarity is not simply about short sentences or plain language. It is about alignment. It is about making sure that what is said reflects exactly what must be done. It is about ensuring that vision, strategy, and execution all speak the same language. A leader cannot say one thing, mean another, and expect their people to move with confidence. To speak with clarity is to speak with honesty. It is to honor those who follow by giving them the truth as it is, not as one wishes it to appear. There is also courage in clarity. To be clear often means to be direct. It means to deliver words that may not always be welcomed, but must be heard. Leaders who avoid clarity in favor of comfort breed weakness in their ranks. Leaders who embrace clarity, even when it cuts, build resilience. They prepare their people not for ease, but for endurance. And endurance is the foundation of achievement. Think of the times when clarity mattered most. Not in moments of calm, but in moments of chaos. When storms rage, when systems collapse, when fear spreads, those who stand tall and speak with clarity become the anchor for others. Their words settle the panic, restore focus, and provide direction. In those moments, people do not remember every detail. They remember the clarity. They remember the steady voice that gave them strength to act when hesitation could have consumed them. Clarity is also respect. It respects the listener's time, their intelligence, and their commitment. A leader who burdens people with unnecessary complexity wastes their energy. But a leader who speaks with clarity shows they value their people enough to give them what they need most: certainty of purpose, certainty of mission, certainty of direction. That certainty builds trust, and trust is the currency of leadership. Without it, words collapse into noise. There will always be temptation to disguise weakness with complicated speech, to use words as a shield against vulnerability. But clarity requires humility. It requires the strength to admit that the most powerful messages are often the simplest. It takes humility to remove ego from language and focus only on what serves the mission. True leaders understand that the spotlight is never on their eloquence. It is always on the mission and the people who must carry it out. The discipline of clarity extends beyond words. It lives in tone, in pace, in silence. A pause, placed with intent, can carry more clarity than 100 hurried sentences. A steady voice, unshaken by pressure, communicates more than a storm of words ever could. Clarity is not only what you say, it is how you embody it. If your voice trembles with doubt, your words, no matter how carefully chosen, will lose their force. But if your voice carries conviction, even the simplest words can ignite courage. To speak with clarity is to lead with presence. People can forgive mistakes, but they cannot forgive confusion that leads them astray. They can endure hardship, but they cannot endure a leader who leaves them uncertain. Clarity is the bridge between vision and execution, between trust and loyalty, between words and deeds. Every leader must master clarity, not as an option, but as a duty. It is a commitment to those who follow. It is the recognition that when you open your mouth to speak, you hold the attention, the trust, and sometimes even the fate of those who believe in you. That is not a privilege. It is a responsibility, and that responsibility demands that every word carries the precision of a blade, cutting away doubt, carving out direction, and forging the path forward. Clarity will outlast eloquence. It will outlast performance. It will echo in the minds of those who heard it long after applause fades. And in the end, when history remembers voices that mattered, it will not be the most decorated, the most complex, or the most entertaining. It will be the clearest. For clarity is the foundation of leadership, and without it, nothing else stands. Discipline and delivery is what transforms words from mere sounds into forces that command respect and inspire action. A leader may choose the right message, may even craft it with clarity, but if it is delivered without discipline, it will fail to carry its full weight. Delivery is the bridge between intent and impact. It is the way the body, the voice, and the presence align to give words their authority. Without discipline, even truth can be overlooked. With discipline, even simple statements can echo like thunder. Discipline in delivery begins with control. A leader must control their tone, their pace, their posture, and their timing. A voice that shakes with doubt spreads uncertainty. A posture that slouches under pressure spreads weakness. Every aspect of delivery communicates, even in silence. The disciplined leader knows that people are not only listening to their words, they are watching their body, their eyes, their stillness, their movements. Every gesture either strengthens or undermines the message. That is why delivery must be trained, rehearsed, and executed with the same precision one would bring to a mission, because in leadership, delivery is the mission of words. A disciplined delivery does not mean mechanical or cold. It does not mean stripping away emotion. In fact, it means mastering emotion, so that it becomes a tool, not a liability. Anger undisciplined turns into rage, but anger disciplined becomes righteous fire that stirs people to act. Passion undisciplined becomes noise, but passion disciplined becomes conviction that moves mountains. Emotion must be harnessed, sharpened and directed with intent. A disciplined leader does not lose themselves in emotion, they command it, and in commanding it, they command others. Discipline also lives in timing, knowing when to speak, when to pause, and when to let silence carry the weight of a message, is a skill forged in discipline. A pause is not emptiness, it is presence. It allows words to sink deeper, to settle in the mind of those who hear them. The undisciplined speaker rushes, fearing silence. The disciplined leader embraces it, knowing that silence can be louder than sound. Silence used with intent becomes a weapon, and like every weapon, it requires discipline to wield. There is also discipline in consistency. A leader cannot deliver one message with fire one day, and with apathy the next. They cannot show strength in front of one audience, and hesitation before another. Delivery must be steady, unwavering, predictable in its conviction. That consistency builds trust. It tells people that no matter the storm, no matter the pressure, their leader's voice will remain the same, calm, firm, disciplined, and that stability becomes the rock others cling to when uncertainty shakes the ground beneath them. Discipline in delivery also requires restraint. Not every word that can be spoken must be spoken. Not every emotion that rises must be released. Leaders know that their delivery carries consequences. An outburst at the wrong time can destroy confidence. A careless remark can damage morale. Discipline is the shield that guards a leader's delivery from recklessness. It is the strength to hold back when silence serves better than speech. The strength to wait for the right moment rather than satisfy the urge to be heard immediately. That restraint separates the impulsive from the disciplined, the loud from the powerful. It is easy to underestimate the power of delivery in leadership. People assume that the content of words is all that matters. But content without delivery is like a weapon without training. It exists, but it does not perform. Consider the difference between an order shouted in panic and the same order spoken with calm authority. The words may be identical, but the outcomes are worlds apart. Delivery is the multiplier. It amplifies or diminishes everything a leader says. That is why discipline in delivery cannot be an afterthought. It must be trained like muscle, sharpened like steel, until it becomes second nature. Discipline is also about presence. A leader who enters a room must carry themselves in such a way that people feel the weight of their commitment before they even speak. Delivery begins before the first word is uttered. It begins in posture, in eye contact, in the way one stands or sits. It begins in the discipline of self-awareness, knowing that the leader is always observed, always studied, always measured. A disciplined leader does not waste those moments. They use them to reinforce their words before their voice even reaches the air. A disciplined delivery is not about performance. It is about authenticity. It is not about pretending to be strong. It is about being strong and allowing that strength to flow into words and actions. Discipline strips away theatrics and replaces them with truth delivered with force. People are not inspired by rehearsed gestures or empty emotion. They are inspired when they sense that what is being delivered comes from a place of control, conviction, and responsibility. Discipline ensures that authenticity is not lost in the chaos of communication. In moments of crisis, discipline and delivery becomes even more vital. Fear spreads fast. Doubt multiplies quickly. A leader's delivery can either add to that storm or cut through it. When panic rises, the disciplined leader steadies their breath, grounds their voice, and speaks with the calm authority that others need. They may feel the same fear, but discipline prevents it from leaking into their delivery. Instead, their voice becomes the anchor, holding everyone steady until the storm passes. That is the true test of disciplined delivery, not how one speaks in comfort, but how one speaks in chaos. Discipline also guards against arrogance. It reminds the leader that delivery is not about themselves. It is about those who receive the message. It prevents the temptation of turning leadership communication into a display of ego. Discipline ensures that delivery is always focused outward, always serving the mission, always serving the people. It is not about being admired for style. It is about being trusted for substance. That humility, rooted in discipline, strengthens the bond between leader and follower. The discipline of delivery is not born overnight. It is forged through repetition, through constant practice, through the willingness to be corrected, and the patience to refine every detail. It is built in training rooms, in quiet reflection, in hours spent studying, not just what to say but how to say it. It is built through mistakes, through moments when words faltered, and the hard lessons that followed. The disciplined leader embraces that process. They understand that delivery is not instinct. It is discipline, and discipline must be earned. Disciplined delivery is the difference between words that are heard and words that are followed. It is the force that transforms a leader's intent into collective action. It is what ensures that clarity is not lost, that conviction is not misunderstood, that purpose is not weakened by hesitation. Without discipline and delivery, leadership is noise. With it, leadership becomes direction. When a leader speaks with discipline, their words do not just pass through ears. They enter hearts, they command hands, they move feet. They do not fade when the speech ends. They continue to live in action long after. That is the legacy of disciplined delivery. It does not end when the sound fades. It endures in the deeds it inspires. Discipline is the backbone of delivery. It steadies the voice, sharpens the message, and magnifies the leader's presence. It is the force that ensures every word carries weight, every pause carries meaning, and every moment of silence carries power. To lead without discipline and delivery is to gamble with trust. To lead with it is to guarantee that when you speak, the world listens, and more importantly, the world acts. Purpose-driven speech is the lifeblood of leadership. It is the difference between words that echo briefly in the air and words that endure in the hearts of those who hear them. A leader who speaks without purpose may sound polished, may sound confident, but their words will eventually vanish because they are not anchored to anything greater than themselves. But when a leader speaks with purpose, every word is connected to a mission, to a cause, to a reason beyond personal gain. It is this sense of direction that transforms speech into a rallying call and transforms followers into believers. A leader must understand that people do not gather to hear empty language. They gather to be reminded why they sacrifice, why they endure, why they must continue even when the weight of the world grows heavier. A leader's speech must supply that reminder. It must draw the line between hardship and meaning, between struggle and achievement. Without purpose, pain feels endless. With purpose, pain becomes fuel. A leader's words are what draw that distinction, what give form to the invisible strength people need to keep going. Purpose-driven speech does not simply describe the mission, it breathes life into it. It does not simply state the goal, it makes people feel it in their bones. It aligns the vision of the leader with the energy of the people, and forges them into one collective force. A leader who speaks with purpose makes the mission personal. They make every listener believe that the task is not someone else's responsibility, not someone else's burden, but theirs as well. This is how armies are built. This is how movements rise. This is how ordinary individuals accomplish extraordinary things. Because purpose was given to them through words that struck deep. There is a weight that comes with this kind of speech. A leader cannot borrow purpose from empty phrases or vague promises. Purpose must be real. It must be grounded in truth, in sacrifice, in responsibility. People can sense when a leader is speaking only to be admired. They can also sense when a leader is speaking because they are consumed by a cause that demands action. Authenticity cannot be faked. It shows in the eyes, in the tone, in the way the words flow not from performance but from conviction. The discipline of purpose means never speaking without it. Every time a leader stands to address others, they must carry the mission inside them so completely that it radiates through every word. Purpose-driven speech is also about direction. It ensures that people know not only why they must act but where their action must lead. Purpose without direction is passion without focus. A leader's speech must take the fire of purpose and channel it toward clear objectives. The purpose must illuminate the path ahead, reminding people that their struggles today are the price of a better tomorrow. The leader does not hide the challenges, does not soften the reality, but frames them inside the larger story of achievement. By tying every sacrifice to a greater mission, the leader makes the unbearable bearable. The power of purpose is that it unites. In every organization, in every mission, there are differences of skill, of background, of perspective. But when a leader speaks with purpose, those differences melt into unity. Purpose is the common ground that binds people together. It tells the youngest recruit and the most seasoned veteran that they are part of something larger than themselves. It takes individuals and turns them into a team, takes teams and turns them into a force, takes a force and turns it into a movement. That is the potential of words when they are driven by purpose. Purpose also brings endurance. When storms come, when setbacks pile high, when doubt whispers in the ear, it is not clever words or polished speeches that sustain people. It is purpose. A leader's speech must be crafted so that in the darkest hours, those who heard it can return to those words and find strength. Purpose-driven speech becomes an anchor in the storm, reminding people that they are not lost, that their suffering is not meaningless, that their effort is not wasted. Leaders who understand this craft their words carefully, knowing that they may be repeated in quiet moments of doubt, long after the leader has left the stage. There is also a sacred responsibility in speaking with purpose. Words can manipulate, they can deceive, they can be used to exploit rather than to elevate. But a true leader never abuses the power of speech. They recognize that to give people purpose is to shape their path, to influence their choices, to direct their sacrifices. That responsibility is immense. It requires honesty, humility, and a relentless commitment to the truth. Purpose-driven speech is not about gaining followers. It is about building believers. It is about giving people something worthy of their loyalty, something worthy of their loyalty, something worthy of their lives. Purpose gives words weight. Without it, even the most eloquent sentences are hollow. With it, even the simplest phrases can inspire generations. Think of the timeless lines that live in history. They endure not because of their style, but because they carried a purpose larger than the speaker. That is the legacy of purpose-driven speech. It outlives the moment. It outlives the applause. It becomes part of the collective memory of those who heard it, and those who carry it forward. The discipline of purpose means never speaking just to fill silence. It means resisting the urge to speak for personal recognition, or for temporary approval. It demands that before a leader speaks they ask themselves what mission these words serve, what purpose they deliver, what fire they ignite. This discipline ensures that speech remains not a performance, but an instrument of leadership. Purpose-driven speech transforms followers into leaders. When people understand the purpose, when they feel it in their hearts, they begin to carry the mission themselves. They no longer wait for orders. They act with initiative, because they know the why behind the what. This is the highest form of leadership speech. It does not create dependence. It creates empowerment. It does not produce obedience out of fear. It produces commitment out of belief. Purpose is what separates leaders who are remembered from those who are forgotten. It is what gives meaning to words long after the leader has spoken them. And it is what ensures that when people walk away, they do not simply remember what was said. They remember why it mattered. That why becomes the foundation upon which action is built, upon which sacrifice is endured, upon which victory is achieved. When a leader speaks with purpose, they give people more than words. They give them direction. They give them strength. They give them meaning. And in the end, purpose-driven speech is not about the speaker at all. It is about the mission, the people, and the legacy that will endure. That is the mark of leadership, not words spoken for applause, but words spoken with purpose, that move people to action, carry them through hardship, and leave behind a fire that never dies. Stories are among the oldest weapons of leadership. They cut through barriers. They reach beyond intellect, and they strike directly at the human heart. Facts may persuade the mind, but stories inspire the soul. A leader who masters the use of stories carries a tool more powerful than statistics, more enduring than arguments, more unifying than commands. Because stories are remembered when data is forgotten, they are repeated when speeches fade, and they become the narrative that shapes how people see themselves and their mission. A story carries the weight of truth in a way that numbers cannot. It gives a face to the abstract, a heartbeat to the distant, a meaning to the sacrifice. A single story of courage can awaken strength in thousands. A single story of failure can teach lessons no manual could ever capture. Leaders who understand this use stories, not for entertainment, but for empowerment. They use them to give their people examples to live by, models to follow, warnings to avoid. In every culture, in every age, it has been stories that carried wisdom forward when all else was lost. Stories are weapons because they bypass resistance. People can argue with logic. They can doubt theory. They can debate strategy. But when they hear a story that touches them, they cannot deny its impact. Stories disarm the skeptical, soften the hardened, and remind the weary why they endure. A leader who tells the right story, at the right time, can shift the morale of an entire force. It is not manipulation. It is leadership through connection. The story does not force belief. It reveals truth in a way that makes belief inevitable. But not every story carries power. A leader must choose stories with precision. They must be rooted in authenticity, built from real struggle, real sacrifice, and real meaning. People know when a story is manufactured, when it is exaggerated, when it is polished for effect, rather than drawn from truth. Such stories weaken trust, instead of building it. But stories born of reality, stories carried in scars, stories carried in victories, earned in defeats endured, those stories strike with force. They cannot be dismissed, because they are carved from life itself. Discipline in storytelling means understanding that a story is not a diversion, it is a weapon, and like any weapon, it must be handled with responsibility. It is not to glorify the leader, but to elevate the mission. It is not to highlight personal achievement, but to highlight collective strength. Leaders who turn stories into personal monuments diminish their purpose. Leaders who use stories to lift their people turn words into fire that spreads courage and commitment. Stories also bridge generations. They connect those who came before with those who carry the mission today. They remind the present that they are part of a legacy greater than themselves. The story of those who sacrificed in the past becomes the foundation upon which the current struggle rests. A leader keeps that chain unbroken by telling the stories of those who walked the path earlier, ensuring that no sacrifice is forgotten, no lesson is wasted, and no courage fades into silence. The rhythm of a story is as important as its content. A leader who delivers a story with discipline allows its lessons to unfold at the right pace. They give space for listeners to feel the struggle, to taste the fear, to celebrate the triumph. They do not rush through it as if it were a detail. They honor it as if it were a life. And in that honor, they teach their people to respect the journey as much as the outcome. Stories serve as blueprints for behavior. When a leader tells of a soldier who stood firm in the face of overwhelming odds, they are not just sharing history, they are instructing everyone who hears it how to act when their own test arrives. When they share the tale of a mistake that cost dearly, they are not confessing weakness, they are arming their people with the wisdom to avoid repeating it. Stories create memory that becomes guidance. They etch lessons so deeply that when the moment of decision comes, the story rises unbidden, steering action in the right direction. There is power in simplicity. The most effective stories are not complicated epics, but moments distilled to their essence. A single act of courage, a single failure turned to strength, a single sacrifice that carried others forward. Leaders understand that brevity sharpens a story's impact. They cut away excess detail until what remains is the pure lesson, the pure fire. That is why the simplest stories often endure the longest. They can be carried easily, remembered clearly, and told again without losing their force. A leader must also know when to deliver a story. Timing determines its impact. In moments of doubt, a story of endurance can restore faith. In moments of fear, a story of courage can awaken bravery. In moments of complacency, a story of failure can jolt people awake. Storytelling is not a constant, it is a strike, precise and deliberate, used when the effect will be greatest. The disciplined leader does not waste stories, they deploy them as weapons at the decisive moment, when they will cut deepest and inspire most. Stories endure because they belong to everyone. When a leader tells a story, it does not remain their own, it becomes part of the people. It is repeated in halls, in quiet conversations, in times of stress. It spreads because it carries meaning that others want to share. And as it spreads, the mission spreads with it. The leader's story becomes the people's story, and the people's story becomes the foundation of the mission's strength. The responsibility of carrying stories is immense. Leaders must preserve them, protect them, and pass them on with honor. To let a story of sacrifice fade into silence is to betray those who lived it. To distort it for comfort or applause is to dishonor its truth. Leaders are custodians of the stories that built the path they walk, and they must treat them with reverence. In doing so, they give their people more than words. They give them a lineage of courage that strengthens their resolve. Stories as weapons remind us that leadership is not only about direction, but about connection. It is about making people feel, not just think. It is about uniting them through shared meaning, not just shared tasks. And it is about leaving behind something that lasts beyond the moment. When leaders tell stories with discipline, with authenticity, and with purpose, they forge a bond stronger than orders, stronger than commands, stronger even than strategy. They forge belief. A leader's words may fade, but the stories they tell can outlive them. They can pass through generations, shaping the behavior of people the leader will never meet, guiding actions in times the leader will never see. That is why stories are weapons. They extend the reach of leadership beyond the present moment into the future. They arm people, not just with instruction, but with meaning, and meaning endures. Courage to speak truth is one of the rarest and most demanding qualities of leadership. Words are not difficult to form, but truth carries a weight that tests the strength of anyone who dares to deliver it. Speaking truth requires more than knowledge, it requires bravery. It demands that a leader put aside fear of consequence, fear of rejection, fear of criticism, and instead give voice to what must be said. Truth is not always welcome. Truth is not always safe. But truth is always necessary. A leader who lacks the courage to speak truth abandons their responsibility. They may offer comfort. They may win applause. But they leave their people unprepared for reality. Leadership is not about pleasing ears. It is about preparing hearts and minds for the road ahead. That road is rarely easy. It is filled with hardship, with sacrifice, with obstacles that cannot be avoided. To deny that reality in speech is to build weakness instead of strength, illusion instead of resilience. A leader owes their people truth, because truth is the foundation upon which courage, unity, and endurance are built. Courage to speak truth is also the courage to confront discomfort. It means telling people what they need to hear, not what they want to hear. It means standing alone if necessary, speaking words that may be unpopular but are right. Weak leaders disguise fear with silence. Strong leaders embrace courage with honesty. They know that truth today may cause discomfort, but lies or half-truths tomorrow will cause destruction. Leadership demands the strength to bear the weight of honesty, even when others cannot. Truth spoken with courage does not destroy, it strengthens. When people know that their leader will not shield them from reality, they grow to trust them. That trust becomes unshakable, because it is forged in honesty. They may not always like what they hear, but they will believe it. They will prepare for it. They will act upon it. And when the challenge arrives, they will not be caught off guard, because their leader had the courage to tell them what was coming. That preparation is a gift greater than comfort, and it is only possible when leaders speak truth without fear. The courage to speak truth often requires standing against the tide. There will be pressure to soften, to bend, to adjust the message for approval. There will be those who encourage silence for the sake of convenience. But leadership is not about convenience. It is about responsibility. The moment a leader allows fear of opinion to shape their words, they cease to lead. Their speech becomes a mirror of expectation instead of a compass of direction. Courage in speech means resisting that tide and holding firm to what must be said, even if the world resists hearing it. Speaking truth also demands discipline. Courage without discipline can turn into recklessness. A leader does not hurl truth carelessly. They deliver it with precision, with respect, and with purpose. Truth delivered without discipline can wound unnecessarily. But truth delivered with discipline can heal, can instruct, can guide. The courage to speak truth is not license to be harsh. It is a responsibility to be honest, while still serving the mission and the people. Discipline ensures that truth becomes a tool for growth, not a weapon of destruction. Courage to speak truth is not limited to great battles or national struggles. It lives in daily leadership. It appears in moments when a leader must admit a mistake instead of hiding it. It appears when they must tell their team the reality of failure, rather than pretending success. It appears when they must confront injustice, when they must defend those without power, when they must raise their voice against what is wrong, even at personal risk. These moments define the measure of a leader. Small truths spoken with courage build the foundation for great truths spoken in times of crisis. History honors those who spoke truth when silence was safer. They may have been ridiculed in their time. They may have been resisted, but their courage shaped the course of events. Their voices carried conviction that outlasted opposition, and what made their words endure was not eloquence but courage, the willingness to stand in the light of truth, regardless of consequence. Every leader who aspires to leave a mark must carry this same willingness. Without it, their speech is fragile. With it, their speech becomes unbreakable. The courage to speak truth also inspires courage in others. When a leader speaks honestly, they give permission for others to do the same. When a leader admits the harsh reality, they show their people that facing it is not something to fear. When a leader reveals their own vulnerability, they teach that strength is not in pretending to be invincible, but in standing firm, despite imperfection. Truth begets truth. Courage spreads. A leader who speaks truth not only sets an example, they build a culture where honesty thrives, where trust deepens, and where resilience grows stronger. It must also be understood that truth can be a lonely path. There will be moments when truth isolates a leader, when speaking it separates them from approval, from support, even from allies. That loneliness is the price of integrity, but it is better to stand alone with truth than to stand together in falsehood. The leader who endures that isolation proves to their people that their loyalty is not to comfort, but to principle. And over time, that loyalty is recognized. The truth resisted at first eventually proves its value. What was once unpopular becomes undeniable, and the leader who had the courage to speak it is remembered not for their loneliness, but for their integrity. Courage to speak truth is inseparable from responsibility. The words of a leader carry weight. To remain silent when truth is needed is to fail those who depend on them. To bend truth for convenience is to betray that responsibility. Every time a leader speaks, they must ask whether their words serve themselves or serve the mission. Courage demands that the mission always comes first. That truth is never sacrificed for ease. That honesty is never abandoned for applause. That is the mark of real leadership. When truth is spoken with courage, it becomes a shield against fear. It removes uncertainty, because people no longer have to guess at reality. It removes doubt, because they know where their leader stands. It removes weakness, because even the harshest truth, once faced, is less frightening than the unknown. Courageous truth turns fear into focus, confusion into clarity, and hesitation into action. It is one of the greatest gifts a leader can give, but only if they themselves have the strength to bear the burden of delivering it. Courage to speak truth defines whether a leader can be trusted. Followers may forgive mistakes, but they cannot forgive deception. They may endure hardship, but they cannot endure false promises. Truth binds leader and follower together with trust that no storm can break. And that trust is the foundation upon which missions succeed, teams endure, and legacies are built. The courage to speak truth is not an occasional choice. It must be a constant commitment. It must live in every word, every command, every address. It must be visible in times of calm and in times of crisis. It must define the leader so completely that people never doubt where they stand. That kind of courage is not easy, but it is essential, for without it, leadership is hollow. With it, leadership is unshakable. The voice of responsibility is what separates true leaders from those who simply hold a title. Leadership is not about privilege. It is not about prestige, and it is not about recognition. It is about carrying the weight of others on your shoulders and understanding that every word you speak has consequences. A leader's voice is not their own. It belongs to the people who trust them, to the mission that depends on them, to the future shaped by their choices. When a leader opens their mouth, they carry not only their own authority, but the hopes, fears, and lives of those who follow. That weight is responsibility, and it must be heard in their voice every time they speak. Responsibility demands that a leader's voice is steady when others tremble. People will look to their leader not only for instruction, but for assurance. If the voice is shaken, if it wavers, it spreads uncertainty like fire. But if it is firm, grounded in responsibility, it becomes an anchor. That steadiness does not mean arrogance. It does not mean pretending to have all the answers. It means acknowledging the burden, honestly, admitting the risks clearly, but carrying it with the calm conviction that gives others strength. Responsibility transforms speech from words into a covenant, a promise that the leader will not abandon, will not mislead, will not shift the weight onto others. Responsibility also requires ownership. When things go wrong, a leader's voice cannot deflect or hide. It must carry accountability. It must say, "This is mine to carry, and I will bear it." The undisciplined leader seeks excuses, points fingers, and protects their pride. The responsible leader accepts the burden, even when it is heavy. That acceptance builds trust. Followers will forgive mistakes, but they will not forgive abandonment. They will walk through hardship with a leader who owns responsibility, but they will walk away from one who runs from it. Every time a leader speaks, they reveal whether their words carry ownership or avoidance, and in that revelation, their character is exposed. Responsibility in voice also means discipline and promise. Leaders must never speak lightly of commitments. To promise is to bind oneself to action, and words given without responsibility will destroy trust faster than any failure. The responsible leader measures their words carefully. They do not overstate, they do not overpromise, they do not dress reality in illusions. They speak what they know they will deliver, and when they deliver, their voice gains strength with every fulfilled word. Responsibility ensures that promises are not empty signals, but contracts written in conviction. A voice of responsibility does not rise only in moments of ceremony or crisis. It must be present in the daily rhythm of leadership. In the small moments, giving direction, correcting errors, praising effort, the responsibility of the leader's voice is constant. Every comment can inspire or discourage. Every instruction can clarify or confuse. Every remark can build trust or break it. Leaders cannot afford careless words, because they carry responsibility for how those words shape the people around them. Even silence has weight. Silence in the face of wrong is itself a message, one that speaks loudly about the leader's sense of responsibility, or lack of it. Responsibility also means speaking for those who cannot. Leaders often carry the voices of their people in their own speech. They must articulate concerns, fears, and hopes that others are unable or unwilling to express. To do so requires empathy, courage, and integrity. It requires recognizing that leadership is not about personal expression, but about representing something greater. When a leader speaks with responsibility, their people know they are being heard, valued, and defended. That recognition builds loyalty that cannot be forced. It must be earned. There is also a moral dimension to responsibility in speech. A leader's voice must be guided, not only by strategy, but by principle. They must use their words not only to direct action, but to uphold values. A voice that is clever but immoral can achieve temporary success, but will eventually corrode the foundation of trust. A voice of responsibility balances strength with ethics, authority with humility, and direction with fairness. It is not enough for speech to move people. It must move them toward what is right. That is the essence of responsibility, to ensure that words serve not just the mission, but the integrity of the mission. Responsibility in speech demands restraint as much as expression. There will be moments when silence is easier, when avoiding the truth seems more convenient, when stepping aside from the burden of speech is tempting. But leadership does not allow retreat from responsibility. A leader must speak when it matters, even if it costs them comfort or approval. Their silence would abandon those who depend on them. Responsibility means choosing the harder path, speaking with clarity, honesty, and courage, when silence might have shielded them from consequence. It must be understood that the voice of responsibility is not always dramatic. It does not always roar in great halls or thunder across crowds. Sometimes it is steady and quiet, but no less powerful. Responsibility is heard in the calm reassurance of a leader in a moment of fear. It is heard in the honest admission of uncertainty, paired with the conviction to find the way forward. It is heard in the promise kept, the burden carried, the truth spoken without embellishment. It is less about volume and more about weight. A leader's voice, when grounded in responsibility, carries that weight, no matter how softly it is spoken. The burden of responsibility is heavy, but it is what gives leadership its meaning. A leader who does not accept it will eventually collapse under the hollowness of their words, but a leader who carries it with discipline finds that their voice becomes a shield for others, a guide through uncertainty, a source of stability. when everything else wavers. Responsibility is not a choice in leadership, it is the foundation of it. Every command, every order, every message must be built upon it, or it will crumble in the face of challenge. People listen differently. When they know a leader's voice carries responsibility, they lean in, because they know what they are hearing is not for show. They follow, because they know the leader will not leave them abandoned. They endure, because they know their struggle is not dismissed or ignored. Responsibility transforms speech into trust, and trust transforms speech into action. That cycle of responsibility and trust is what builds unbreakable teams, unshakable missions, and enduring legacies. The voice of responsibility is, above all, the voice of service. It serves the people before it serves the leader. It serves the mission before it serves ambition. It serves truth before it serves comfort. To speak with responsibility is to declare through every word that the leader exists not for themselves, but for those who depend on them. That declaration, made again and again in speech and in silence, is what defines leadership more than rank, position, or title ever could. When the noise of the world fades and words are remembered, people will not recall how loud a leader spoke or how eloquent their sentences were. They will remember whether their leader's voice carried responsibility. They will remember if they could trust those words, if they felt protected by them, if they were guided through hardship by them. That is the test of leadership speech, not beauty, not applause, but responsibility. For when responsibility lives in a leader's voice, it endures as a steady call that outlasts storms, unites hearts, and defines the path forward. A call to action is the moment where words meet responsibility, where speeches transform from inspiration into motion, where leadership becomes more than influence, it becomes impact. A leader who stops at motivation has not completed their task. A leader who finishes with applause has not fulfilled their duty. The measure of leadership is not in the beauty of words, but in the actions those words ignite. When a leader speaks, their mission is not merely to be heard, it is to compel movement, to summon courage, to drive forward momentum that endures long after the echoes of their speech have faded. That is the essence of the call to action. It is easy to stir emotions, to move hearts, to touch minds with words. But the difference between a speech that is remembered and a speech that changes lives lies in the challenge that follows. A call to action is not comfortable. It does not leave people satisfied in their seats. It demands something of them: sacrifice, discipline, effort, courage. It calls on them to stand taller, to bear burdens, to confront fear, and to commit to something greater than themselves. Without that challenge, words remain entertainment. With it, they become the spark of transformation. The call to action must be clear. Ambiguity is the enemy of commitment. People cannot rally behind vague ideals or half-drawn visions. They need direction they can grasp, steps they can take, sacrifices they can measure. A leader must know where they are pointing their people and what they are asking of them. Clarity does not diminish inspiration, it strengthens it. A call to action is not diluted poetry, it is sharpened steel. When spoken with clarity, it pierces hesitation and leaves no room for uncertainty. The audience knows exactly what is expected, and in that knowledge they find focus. But clarity alone is not enough. The call must also be worthy. People will not move for empty causes. They will not sacrifice for missions that lack meaning. A leader must connect their call to action with purpose. They must speak to the higher cause, the enduring value, the principle that makes sacrifice worthwhile. To ask men and women to risk, to struggle, to endure hardship, the leader must show them that their actions will matter, that their efforts will carry weight beyond themselves. Purpose fuels perseverance, and a call to action without purpose cannot survive the trials of reality. A true call to action carries urgency. Leaders cannot ask their people to act someday, to act eventually, to act when it is convenient. They must call for action now. Delay weakens resolve. Postponement breeds complacency. The leader's voice must create a sense of immediacy, a recognition that the time for waiting is over, that hesitation is costly, that the moment for decision has arrived. This urgency is not about panic, it is about momentum. It propels people forward before doubt can pull them back. It reminds them that the future will not wait, and neither should they. A call to action is not shouted into the void. It is aimed directly at the hearts of those who hear it. For that reason it must be personal. Each listener must feel as though the words speak directly to them, as though the responsibility being laid down rests on their shoulders, as though their choice matters. People must not leave thinking the challenge belongs to someone else. They must leave knowing it belongs to them. A leader's voice must strip away anonymity and summon individual accountability. That is how a group becomes an army, how followers become participants, how words become movement. The call to action is also the moment of greatest courage for a leader. For when they demand action, they risk resistance. They risk being ignored. They risk standing alone if others do not follow. But leadership is not about safety. It is about risk in pursuit of greater purpose. The leader who avoids calling others to act for fear of failure abandons their responsibility. True leaders speak with the conviction that even if few follow, the call was still necessary, the challenge still worthy, the responsibility still theirs. Their courage in issuing the call is itself a model for the courage they ask of others. When a call to action is delivered with clarity, purpose, urgency, and courage, it ignites something powerful. People move beyond inspiration into discipline. They translate emotion into endurance. They transform belief into practice. That is why history remembers not the speeches that entertained, but the speeches that commanded action. Calls to action built movements, fueled revolutions, won wars, and changed the course of nations. Words without challenge fade into memory, but words with a call to action echo across generations. The tone of the call to action matters. It cannot be desperate or pleading. It must be commanding yet respectful, strong yet humble, urgent yet controlled. People must hear resolve in the leader's voice, the unshakable belief that what is being asked of them is both necessary and possible. A wavering call weakens resolve. A confident call instills strength. The leader's own commitment must be evident in every syllable, for if the leader is not prepared to act, their followers will not act either. A call to action does not always demand grand gestures. Sometimes it asks for daily discipline, for consistency in the small things, for the resilience to endure routine hardship. Other times it calls for monumental courage, for stepping into danger, for risking comfort, for challenging the impossible. Whatever form it takes, the principle is the same. The leader asks people to move from words to deeds, from thought to execution, from intention to reality. Without this transition, leadership is incomplete. There is also permanence in a true call to action. It does not end when the speech ends. It lingers in the mind. It presses on the conscience. It follows the listener into their choices. Long after applause fades, the call continues to whisper or thunder in their thoughts, demanding response. This permanence is not created by rhetoric alone. It is created by responsibility, the leaders and the listeners. When both understand that lives, missions, and futures depend on action, the words cannot be dismissed. They must be answered. Leaders must recognize that the call to action is not about perfection of delivery, but about sincerity of demand. Audiences do not need flawless language. They need genuine conviction. They need to hear in the leader's voice the absolute belief that the action being called for is essential, non-negotiable, and worth every sacrifice. This authenticity resonates more deeply than polished speech. It tells people that what they are being asked to do is real, not staged, not performative. It tells them that their leader believes in them enough to call them forward. When leaders fail to give a call to action, they leave people inspired but idle. They may leave audiences filled with emotion, but without direction. That emotion dissipates into nothing. Inspiration without action becomes frustration. Energy without focus becomes waste. By calling for action, leaders give people a channel, a purpose, a mission. They convert energy into momentum, emotion into progress, and inspiration into achievement. The greatest leaders in history understood this. They did not end their speeches with comfort. They ended them with a demand. They asked their people to stand, to fight, to endure, to sacrifice. They asked for commitment, not applause. And because they asked, their people acted. Because they demanded, their people delivered. Because they called, their people answered. That is the legacy of leadership, not the words themselves, but the action those words unleash. The call to action is the defining test of a leader's speech. It is the moment when followers discover whether the leader truly believes in them, whether the leader trusts them enough to demand something of them, whether the leader respects them enough to challenge them. When the call is clear, worthy, urgent, personal, and courageous, it moves people beyond listening into living, beyond believing into doing. It forges commitment, unity, and momentum. It transforms speeches into history. A leader who speaks without a call to action may be remembered for eloquence. A leader who speaks with a call to action will be remembered for impact. And in the end, leadership is not about being remembered. It is about what is achieved. Words alone do not shape the world. Actions do. And it is the leader's duty to ensure that their words are not the end, but the beginning, not the conclusion, but the command. That is why every true leader must finish with the same truth. Now is the time. You are the one. This is the moment. Act. When all is said and done, the true measure of leadership is not found in titles, ranks, or applause. It is found in the power of words carried with conviction, sharpened with clarity, and delivered with purpose. To speak like a leader is to understand that your voice is more than sound. It is a weapon, a compass, a lifeline. It is the tool through which you guide, inspire, and command. Clarity ensures your message cannot be lost. Discipline in delivery makes certain it cannot be ignored. Purpose breathes life into your words so they endure beyond the moment. Stories give them weight, courage gives them strength, responsibility gives them credibility, and the call to action gives them power. Each keynote we have explored is not a fragment, but a link in a chain. Together, they forge the unbreakable bond between words and deeds, between leaders and those who choose to follow them. But remember this, speeches are not written to be admired, they are written to move people. Your duty as a leader is not simply to be heard, it is to command action. Your responsibility is not to entertain, but to prepare, to direct, and to inspire action in the face of uncertainty. To speak like a leader is not to sound impressive, it is to leave no one unchanged. So when your moment comes, when you stand before those who look to you for guidance, do not waste that moment with empty words. Speak with clarity, deliver with discipline, anchor your words in purpose, tell stories that matter, speak with courage, bear responsibility, and never leave without a call to action. If you do these things, your voice will not fade when the speech ends. It will live on in the choices of those who heard you, in the actions they take, in the future they build. That is the legacy of leadership, not the sound of your voice, but the strength of the actions it commands. Speak like a leader, and the world will move.